Hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, who's our lead solutions engineer. Dion today will be doing a quick demo, but he's also here to answer your questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and type them into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. All right, let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Dave.
Fantastic. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. And there is your screen.
Excellent, excellent. Well, hey, everybody, thank you very, very much for joining us. We always, I enjoy, this is one of the highlights of my week. I really enjoy spending time with the developers, answering questions. In fact, the one I'm going to cover today came in through guides at alphasoftware.com. So if you have questions, the more you can get them in there, that allows us to prep and do a real good job of being able to answer them and also sharing that answer with many other developers. Because if you're having a problem, guess what? Most other people are having a problem too. So it's really exciting to go through this. I'm looking forward to go through this at this venture. So I have a really neat demonstration regarding the Viewbox control. And I think you're really going to enjoy it because it's going to touch on a couple cool capabilities of the Viewbox, and we'll explore that a little bit more. And I just think you'll really enjoy what we're going to go through today. If not, let us know. That's what the questions and chat area is there. So if you have any questions, go to the GoToWebinar control panel, go to the questions area, enter your questions there, and Dave will be monitoring. Sarah will be joining us shortly. And so you'll see that we'll be able to review those on the topic we have today. And if you have other topics, we definitely want to hear about those also. So that's really interesting. So, okay, so let's dive in. Now, beforehand, I want to go over and first give props to Dave. He must be psychic because this year the Alpha DevCon is a virtual developers conference.
It was
So
very
it
forward
must have
thinking
been
of us, I have to say, given the state of the coronavirus. Yeah, absolutely. We were geniuses.
Or Dave had knowledge we didn't have, mister. Have you been shorting the market or anything like that at the same time? You know, you gotta
No
seem to know
comment,
what's
my
going on.
friend, and I'm not speaking of any recent travel to China either. Sorry.
So all joking aside, I hope everybody in our community and their families and friends and beyond that are safe and well. Feel free to self-quarantine. In fact, this webinar is a good way to do each week. I'll give you 1 hour of self-quarantining in front of your machine. But again, we do hope everybody's safe and sound and doing well. And if you haven't signed up, we really would love to have you go to Alpha DevCon. One of the key things that's very important about this year's DevCon is that we're really focusing on training and training on the new technology, on some of the core skill sets. I like to call them the Oompa Loompas are very busy in the back office developing new capabilities for Alpha, and we'll be presenting those and going over those in detail. So you will not want to miss that. And very important here, and I wanted to highlight this, your registration includes access to high quality recordings of the event. So obviously, you know, with a virtual thing, you know, you have normal business it allows you to actually kind of maintain normal business. But you're gonna have to come in and out. Everything's gonna get recorded. So if you miss a segment or you just, for whatever reason, you spaced, like I will do every once in a while, you'll be able to go back and re-review them, so think of it as almost a very powerful library of knowledge that you'll have available to you. And again, it will be cutting edge. It will cover new and existing capabilities. And we're really spending a lot of time saying, you know, what is going to provide the most value to our developer teams out in the marketplace. So register now if you haven't already. Get on there and do that. We look forward to having you with us there. And with that, Dave, any other announcements? I understand Transform Tuesday was a cool one this week.
It was a cool one. It was also a review. We went back into the Transform programming language and showed people how to build out calculated fields, something that they know how to do anywhere. I know this group does, but something that you can do actually quite easily in Transform as well. Thank you.
Yeah, key differentiator for the Transform technology there. So lots of fun stuff. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into one of our developers sent in a question regarding, well, you know, you've talked a lot about the Viewbox, and I've been talking a lot about the Viewbox technology because from a UI perspective, it is one of the most powerful components that has been created. mainly for two reasons. One reason is that it's incredibly flexible, meaning it can do many things. It slices it, dices it, julienne fries. It does everything. It's like Ron Popeil of UI devices. The other is that it is a combination of very lightweight and HTML, CSS focus. So all it does is really take HTML and CSS, combine it with some data and spit it out. And it does that insanely fast. So therefore, you get a very responsive UI, you get a very flexible UIs because you can use out of the box CSS and HTML. And last but not least is that it's lightweight. It doesn't take a lot of space. So therefore, pages render faster, apps download faster, and they refresh faster. I mean, like when you do a refresh, you'll see in this demonstration, it's essentially instantaneous. So the beauty of that is that the Viewbox control is becoming more and more a go-to kind of control. One last thing that I found that's a huge benefit for the Viewbox is that sometimes when you're putting together a user interface, it's going to have multiple components and maybe some nesting and some other things like that. Well, when you're doing it with the traditional controls in alpha, it will work, but it's kind of a little bit, you know, you're kind of putting things together and it becomes a little just cumbersome sometimes when you have a more complex interface. Well, if you're mainly focused on read-only kind of capabilities, and again, that's an important criteria, although that is changing over time anyway, what it allows you to do is create interfaces and build interfaces that are very flexible, that are very complex, yet easy to maintain and fast to render. So it actually sometimes is faster to take an existing set of HTML and CSS and then just use a cool technique called templating to template that data and iterate through it, etc. And therefore you can create a more complex user interface, but in the end it's lighter and it's actually easier, and you can use talented HTML and CSS designers to help you do it, because I got to tell you, I'm not a designer by anywhere in this universe. And so other people are very talented at creating, and in fact, we have Scott on staff who's just an amazing creative individual who can create these visualizations that I can't even think of, but I can take his work, combine it with the Viewbox and win with it. So we're gonna dive into that today. I've got a demonstration ready to go. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and just show you first what the demonstration is. And while that's booting up, make sure if you have questions, go to the questions area and jump on in there. So this is a fairly straightforward, but it's mainly meant for the concept. The idea behind this is that I have a set of data in my database. And this, in this case, is I'm using Northwind. So I have some customer data. And what I want to be able to do is display that data, but more importantly, I want to be able to on the fly filter that data and show a subset of that information. So you'll notice I have a cities drop-down box on the left and a button called filter. So let's go ahead and pick London, because I know there's a fair much stuff in London. And then I can click filter here and you'll see, notice what happened. This is a view box here. It grabbed the data from the database and it merged it with a very simplistic user interface, and you know, so almost like a list interface here. And I just did it very simple because I wanted to make it, and I will be able to provide this to anybody who wants it. It uses the built-in Northwind SQL, I'm sorry, connection string. So I can go in and say, oh, well, let's go to cows. And so we'll see, oh, and then filter. I'd actually probably do that. So I'll go through and I'll just hit some other stuff and hit filter, and you'll notice that it does this. Now I'm using an animation, that's why you see that cool kind of effect that's going on in there. But even that, I can change that so it's instantaneous, and I'll show you how to do that. So therefore, just whap, you get the new data in there. Now, what's neat is once I've got this set up, now I can go in and say, you know what, I want to lay this out differently. Well, that's just HTML and CSS. I can go in there and do that, and I don't have to touch code. I don't have to rearrange text boxes or labels or anything like that. It's very, very straightforward and very simple. So the next few minutes, I'm going to walk through how I built this. Excuse me, everybody. And then we can explore a little bit more of all the advantages of it. Like for instance, you know, I click filter here, but the reality is if I add to the on change event, I can like select a city and immediately sit there. I could add multiple items here to do a filter of this information here. And this data is not limited to a single level. So in this demonstration, this is single level data, But let's say I had companies and orders, I could easily extend this so that my view box shows company data and then a set of orders and display that nicely with templating. And we may want to do I might plan on doing like a follow-up to show that kind of multi-level capability, because I want to focus just on the core skill sets today. Well, I guess, Dave, we know what we're doing next week on our webinar. So create it from there.
Great.
Excellent. So let's go ahead and go through this. So again, I'm going to start with a UX control. So we'll go here and go UX component. Oh, by the way, I wanted to show you that whole control is 74 kilobytes. I mean, nothing. I mean, it's just nothing. I mean, compared to some of my other controls where I'm doing other things, you know, 200K, 300K, 400K and greater, we're talking about 74 kilobytes. I mean, that's almost like an SMS message so therefore, when I render and deploy this to a person's web browser, it's just going to be almost showing instantaneously. So let's go ahead and go into web component. I'm going to create a UX here, and we're going to click OK. So I'm creating a blank UX, as we've seen before. So I'm going to go to my controls area. And what I like to do is, you know, in my style, I like to use panel cards because that's the basis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a panel layout. And then I'm going to add 2 panel cards. Now I could click here, or I can just right click here and say add panel card after, and I can put in 2 of them and boom. Okay, so it's added my 2 panel cards there. I would normally go through and name them. I don't want to take the time today, but it's always very important that you rename your panel cards so that when you create other action JavaScript, it's much more readable from that standpoint. So on this late set, I'm going to say this is 20%. I'm going to set it over here. And then in here, I'm going to actually just leave that open for layout size. So that will be 80%. It's going to extend in my panel layout to grab the rest of the data that's not used. And then I'm going to go ahead and go up here and put a panel header in it. I could put a control bar, which, by the way, you could put a drop down, which does all the stuff I'm doing here, but I'm going to go no for now. Just keep her simple. And then I'm going to go and put in Viewbox, actually argument driven Viewbox control. And save that there. And sorry, Viewbox. Okay, so as you notice in our demonstration, I've got a left area and a right area. So let's go ahead and first, we'll come back and work on this in a moment. Let's focus on our view box first. So I'm going to go here to panel card number 2. I'm going to go over to the left. Now, the view box is a data control. That's why it's in this group. And if you're not aware of it, the reason that this group or these controls are grouped together is they're all can be linked to a data source, SQL, backend, et cetera. They can be data driven. Other ones aren't in terms of what they do. So I'm going to go down here, and I think I might have, there it is. It's right under the list control. It's sort of a lightweight list control capability. So I'm going to go ahead and just put in Viewbox, customer Viewbox. Okay. And I have my Viewbox there. And so far it's undefined. And what I am going to do is over here on the right-hand side, I'm going to go ahead and say fill container. And the reason I do that is I want whatever content is in this Viewbox to expand and take over that complete panel card. Otherwise, it puts like a little label up top and, you know, size, and you can use it that way. It's just this is the preference I like to use from here. Okay. So now that I've got that Viewbox, save often, I'm going to open it up. And by the way, I can open it up by just double clicking on it, or I could go over here to Viewbox property and click on that. Some like buttons and other things, they've got pre-defaulted double click actions. You can kind of explore and see from there. Okay, so I've opened up my Viewbox here. And I could go ahead and import a sample one, but I'm going to build this from scratch. So you'll see right now that I'm on the home, it's giving me some documentation. If you click on here, it takes you to a great HTML page that Sarah manages. It has a lot of cool examples and neat things you can do with view boxes. It's really fun. So, but I'm gonna go here to the second tab, which is called data source. So this is where we're defining, well, what is going to be in here. Now, the interesting thing is the default behavior of the view box is HTML, which means you can just paste HTML in it, and it's just a area that has HTML. And I've used that on projects where I just want to have some static HTML on my page. I used to use the freeform container. Now I use the view box in this mode where I just boom, go into layout here. I can put in CSS, and it's going to render that inside of my environment as HTML. But I want to make this data driven. So therefore, what I'm going to do is go to this button right here, and you can see I can say, you know what? The data, it's going to be HTML generated by merging data into a template. And we'll talk more about templating. Okay, so now that I've done that, you'll notice that my screen changed a bit. So first it's saying, well, great, okay, you want this to be data driven, but where are you going to get your data? So therefore you have data source type. And as you can see, there's a wide range of abilities to get this data source. So for instance, you can have a list control that, and that's really cool, by the way, for offline. What I'm going to show you right now is an online example, but you could use the list control to kind of cache the data locally using that technology, and then have a Viewbox for rendering and display. And there's some examples in our documentation to do that. The benefit of that is the list control can pull that data offline and make that available in a, so you don't have to be connected to the server. There's also another trick you can do is that you'll notice another thing is JavaScript function. Well, interesting enough, you can also use what's called the client-side data cache as another method to offload and bring down data and have that available. So really some fun things you can explore with it. But so we've got a list control, you've got JavaScript function, you can put in static JSON if you already have a preset set of data that's not going to change, you just want to render it. Database query is the one I'm going to use, but also remember, you can use a REST API call, which is very powerful, because as we move more and more into the API world, what you're going to do is you don't really necessarily want to connect directly to your database. You want to wrap your organization in an API, and then even your user interfaces for internal systems don't go directly to the database, they go to an API, which it's a little more work, but the benefit over time is that, let's say you go and change the database, well, all these apps that you've written that were dependent on that structure, you're kind of in a little bit of trouble. But with an API, you can basically in the API take into account and keep those APIs alive, add new ones for new functionality. So we'll talk more about that, because that's where the world is going. That's where Alpha is going. It's very powerful. But today I'm going to use database query. By the way, before I go there, there's one last one called custom, and that's where it will actually call an XBasic function. And then in the XBasic function, you can do anything you want to generate the data that's going to drive here. So as you can see, from a data store standpoint, if you can think of something, there's a way to implement it within the Viewbox. There's no way around that. So I'm going to go to database query. Okay, so now this looks kind of like, oh man, this looks familiar. This looks like a grid or a list builder. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to select our connection string, and I'm using the Northwind here. And I'll go back and recap. If you haven't done that, I'll recap how you can get that put together very quickly. We have our way of getting the data. I'm going to use fields from the table. So note this could be used with a stored procedure or any other method you want, but I'm going to just use fields. And I'm going to go ahead and go take the customers table. So it's inspecting my database source, and I'm going to go to customers. And I'm going to go into customers, and I'm just going to grab a few items here. And by the way, if I have like image URLs and stuff like that, I can include that. That's, the Viewbox is super powerful in terms of being able to bring that data back and display it. Now, I'll come back and talk about filtering in a moment, but I can also order this and say, you know what, I want it ordered by company name. Things that I'm sure everybody here is familiar with it. And you can see there's also some options for saying delay render until explicit refresh or visible, but that's it. There's also some neat, and we haven't covered this before, but there's some really cool security and show hide expressions. So if you actually have security enabled, you can control what actually gets into the Viewbox. It's pretty neat. There's some fun things you can do that. Okay, so we have our data source now. I'm going to go here to fields, and you'll notice the fields I selected are now available. And here are the different fields that are coming back from my database. Now, my next step is I've got those fields, I want to lay those out on the screen. So now I go over here to Viewbox Layout. Now you'll notice I'm currently in what's called the Genie mode, and I'm going to show you that real quick and then talk about the freeform editor. So I'm in my Viewbox layout, and I can click Add Item, and you can see in here are my fields. I'm just going to grab them and put them on here. So this is similar to a UX builder, very similar, kind of similar concept, not as powerful. In certain ways, it's even more powerful, but in terms of, you're not doing containers and other stuff. But you can take that information, and there are things like containers, so you can have data grouping and other stuff that's available. Very important is that you can also use what's called the list layout container or list row container that makes it look and act like a list control. It's pretty nice from that. You can also use tabs and other things here. And we're not going to cover those today, but we can do that in the future because there are a lot of flexible aspects you can do in there. Now, that said, I want to show you that if I want to, I can click here and enable the freeform editor. And what that did is it basically converted my Genie to freeform HTML. And this is where the power really starts kicking in. So if I want to, I can actually take some HTML and just paste it right in here. And then these are my field names that are going to be rendered. I can then just modify them. So if I had a HTML designer create a very nice looking, like a profile screen that had a picture, it had a first name, a last name, etc., and it was all nicely laid out, I can paste that HTML in here and then just go in and put in where I want my real data to overwrite it. And the cool thing about that is that it just substitutes that text in, or whatever it is, a URL or text, in that location, and therefore all the styling and everything stays the same. So I'm going to go ahead to make this sort of a list. I'm going to go ahead and just do a quick modification so it looks okay. And then I'm going to go here, and last but not like here is address. Okay, and at the end of it, I'm going to put a break, because what I want to do is for each row that's spit out, I want to go ahead and make it on a different row from here. Okay, so I've got my data source. I know what fields are coming back, and I've made my layout here. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's give it a run and look what it shows. So you'll see when this runs, it's connected to a data source, it's live. So it's making a call to the database. In a few moments, you'll see, boom, there are my data in my database. And you can see how fast that rendered. There was a little bit of time here, but it's actually super duper fast. That was just alpha internal there. When it's running in a web browser, it's going to go really fast. So as you can see, my layout is not exactly the most pretty thing in the world, but now I can just go in and play HTML and things like that to make it look really good. But it gets more powerful from here. So again, when it did that query, it said, just give me all the customers, and you may or may not want that scenario. It's up to you. But what I want to be able to do is make this data-driven or argument-driven so that I only filter and see a number of things there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my environment, and in my panel card 1, we're going to create my sort of search criteria as we did before. So the first thing I want to do in panel card number 1 is add my drop-down box. So I'm going to click drop-down box, and I'll go city drop-down box. So it puts there. And then I also want to go here and add a button, actually not an image. What do I want to do that? I could add an image, by the way, if I wanted to make it look a little nicer, but go ahead here, and I'm going to go ahead and add a button in here so that there's a button below that, and I'll call that filter data. And I'm going to do two things to make it kind of cool. I'm going to go ahead and put that at the top versus the bottom, and I also want that to be 100%. So I'm going to use my handy dandy quick editor up here where I click on here and say 100%, and it sets the width of this button to be 100%. And then to make it look really fancy, and I want to do a image followed by text, I'm going to select my image, like to use SVG icons, and I'll go filter, and there it is. Cool. Got a little pre-made image already ready to go in there. So now I'm going to save that. Let's just see what it looks like. Again, no filters have been applied, so you're going to see all that data come back and be displayed on the screen. Dun, 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 dun. But now you notice I've got like this nice button here for filter, and I've got my city drop-down box. So I can see right away I want to make a couple adjustments. One is I want this to look a little nicer. So let's go ahead and go into the city. I'm going to put the, I'm going to change the label to city, and I want that label to be above so that I do there. And then I'm also going to make that 100% of the width of my card so it stretches it out. Now, last but not least is, well, we have to have some data in there. So we use a standard way to update a data drop-down box with choices. I click dynamic. I can then click my data source. I can then select my customers, and I want to pull my list of cities. That way I know it's going to pull lists from that same data table, so I know I'm going to have the cities. Now, reality is this is probably a foreign key table, some other table that you're going to use that in that. And by the way, the list, that data view could be based off of a view. It doesn't have to be a data table. So it's up to you. So if I preview it, you'll just see, here's my cities. So cool. Okay. So now we can go in here and you'll see that now we have something that looks a little prettier as it renders. Okay. So my cities are popping down. I've got my filter data, but you'll notice when I do this, nothing happens because we have to wire that up. We'll do that next. But we've got the basics of our structure here. So now what we need to do is somehow connect all of this stuff to the Viewbox. And it's pretty darn straightforward. And it uses some built-in functionality of Alpha. So the way to do that is I go back into my design. I go to my customer Viewbox here. I'm going to open that up. And I'm going to go to my data source. So as I mentioned before, there's a filter system. So I could put in here, I could say, city is equal to London. And it would just apply that filter. If you had a fixed filter, that's how you would do it. But what we can do is we can make that dynamic, and that's through a concept called arguments. And we've talked about them before, but what arguments are essentially, think of them as variables that are tied to the user, the UX that you're using. And you can set those through code. They can be automatically set by fields in there. There's a lot of flexibility about here. And what's nice about arguments, and we've talked about this in the past, is that sometimes people will use session variables. So I could say, for instance, city is equal to session.city or something like that. But the problem with session variables, if I have 3 of these same UXs open in 3 tabs, that may be a problem. So I like to use arguments. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to define my argument. It opens up my define argument. I'm going to insert a new argument. I'm just going to call that city. Now, when you create an argument, you want to tell it what type. Is it a character, numeric, logical, etc.? So I'm going to select character. Now, once I've defined an argument, so it's like, think of it as defining a variable name. You say, well, how do we populate this argument? Because Alpha is going to take care of basically grabbing whatever data you want to put into that argument and do it automatically for you. So you'll see over here that we have some options. The first one here is called set value at runtime, and I'm going to show you that's the one we're going to use here. But you'll notice there are other ways to set this argument. This is where it really gets interesting. You can get it from a variable. So for instance, like a session variable. So if you wanted to use session variables to load that argument, you can do that. You can also get it from the current logged in user. So that user extended table, you could look up in there and say, get a region code or a city code and then use that in here. And whoever logs in, it will on the fly look up their data and use that information. It's very, very handy. And then a very powerful one also is XBasic. So you can even calculate how you want this argument to be done with an XBasic code, which gives you infinite flexibility. For instance, let's say this argument needs to be populated from a web API to another system. Well, you create an XBasic function, call that web API, get that information, and then it will pass it back to this argument. But I'm going to use the straightforward one, which is get value from the set value at runtime. Now, when I have that, I click this ellipsis button, and it opens up this box here, and it will allow me to see what other controls are on my user interface. So what I want to do is I want to look at that drop-down box, grab whatever the value is there, and put it in my argument. That's the mapping. And so in this case, I'm going to select city drop-down box. Now, the cool thing is once I've done this, anytime that city dropdown changes, the argument changes. I don't have to worry about doing it. It's just done. I've linked it. So anywhere I reference this argument, I'll know if anything changes on the user interface, Alpha is going to handle it for me. So I'm going to click OK. So now we have our argument. It is our argument binding is to this city Dropbox, and I click OK. Now we can go in, and now that we have an argument, we can use that argument in our filter. I want to just check so I don't screw this up here because I always do. How did I set that? I just want to make sure. Yep. Okay, cool. Okay. So now what we do is we are in our view box. We have our argument. Now I go here to the filter criteria and I open that up. And now I can use this to create it. So like I did before, I can click city. is equal to, and again, if I wanted this to be fixed, I could go ahead and type that in. But if I want it dynamic, you'll notice over here, there's a little button called Insert Argument. And that allows me to pick one of my arguments that I created. And you're not limited to one, you could have 4 or 5. And you could actually create this query off of 4 or 5, which is what you'll probably do. Say, okay, let's say these are the 5 criteria. You're basically building up a select query in Alpha. So I'll say city. Now notice something interesting, and this is an important thing to know about arguments. Before, when I did it manually, I did London with single quotes around it, because basically Alpha passes this to the SQL database, and then the SQL database goes, oh, okay, it's a text field, so I'm searching on that. That's how I need to do it here. But notice when I insert the city here, you'll notice there's no single quotes. And the reason why is when I defined the argument, I said this was a character type. If I had said it was numeric. So now Alpha knows, oh, that argument, well, when I go ahead and pass it to the database, I'm gonna have to wrap it with those little quotes, because that's what the database is looking for. But this makes it easy. It makes it easy. You don't have to worry about missing a comma or a apostrophe or single quote, etc. from there. So again, selected the field I want to search, and I inserted the target, and here we go. So now I have a filter criteria based on that argument for my view box. So let's go ahead and click Save. Go into Working Preview. And you'll notice something right out of the gate. When I load it up, where did my data go? Well, the reason the data is there is my argument's not set, it's empty. So therefore there are no matching records, so therefore it doesn't show anything in my view box. Now we'll talk about how to handle that. You may not want that behavior, so we'll see in a moment. But you'll notice now I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna select Boise, and I'm gonna click Filter Data. Oh, I have to do one more thing. Now, yeah, sorry. So what I did here is I set that. What happened behind the scenes is set the argument. The view box now is looking at that argument, but we missed a step, or I missed a step, which is we have to tell the view box, now that you have this new argument, refresh yourself. So we go into our button here, we add a new action, and I'm going to type the word view box, and it's going to bring up my view box control actions. So the action I want is I'm going to say refresh data, and if I have multiple view boxes, I can select the one here. Cool. So, and there's a cool feature called keep selection, which if you have one where you're clicking on things, it will keep that selection. So basically this is saying when this is triggered, just go ahead and refresh the data in there. Notice that I don't tell it like refresh the arguments. I don't tell it to set this or that or do anything. It just tells the view box, and the view box is responsible for figuring out itself how to refresh itself, what it should go do. If I'm based on a list control, it'll go talk to the list. If I'm based on a custom, it'll go do that XBasic. It's really up to there from there. So I'll go save, go to working preview. And in a moment, again, we won't have any data in here. But now I can go ahead and select my city, click filter data, and there you go. Just automatically handles it from there. Like if I go to London, let's go down to London. Now what I might want to do is, well, that's kind of kludgy to hit filter data. It's up to you. So what I can do is just go into my city drop down. And again, why you want to centralize.
Glad you brought that up, because that's actually, that was the user question of, do I have to do it with the button, or can I do it just when I change the control? So
you
good,
do.
I'm glad you got to it.
The person who asked has to continue to use the button. Everybody else, you can use the following thing. So down here, the drop down here has the on change event, which detects when this value has changed. And you can see there's tons of them that are available. I mean, if you had like a text field, you could literally do it on the key up. So every time they touch a key and key up, you could trigger some other item. That may be annoying for people, but kind of makes for a cool thing. So I'm gonna go into the on change event. Now, again, if I had put that JavaScript action, we talked about it last week in the centralized here, I could reference it, but I'm just gonna recreate it real quick. So I'll go here, I'll say refresh data and go to customer view box, and I'm gonna click OK. So let's save that and go and do a working preview. And once it proves, now we can click city and watch what happens when I select that. Boom. automatic. Now, one thing I do want to do while we're here is I'm going to go ahead and just launch this in the browser because I want you to see what it looks like in the browser. So very flexible, very easy, and you can do a lot of really fun things with it. And again, light, so it's fast, and as you can see, very flexible. So this allows you to create really nice looking search and data information. So I can go in here and just say, okay, for instance there. And you'll notice what's going on is we're not necessarily, all that's happening here is that it's requerying this database. So there's a little time, but you'll notice that it's very light because all it's doing is saying, hey, server, give back this information to me, and then update, then it does the merge and does that all on there. So the other thing that's nice about this is that the client is doing all the rendering of this using their personal, so that it takes load off the server. The server is really just sending back a little piece of JSON to load into that Viewbox control. And if you were to develop this control off of a list function, it wouldn't even go back to the database. It would load up that list. That list would be available. So you may have a little bit slower load time, but now that it's on that UX and local, when I do a filter of some kind, it literally would come right, it happens all on the client machine, which then again reduces the amount of work your server is doing. It makes it extremely responsive for the user. They get a very fluid, natural way of doing it, and you have all the flexibility that goes there. So a quick recap. The power of the Viewbox is enormous. A, it's small, light. B, it can be driven by many different data sources, list, local, JavaScript, queries, etc. When you do all that, you have access to the arguments and other pieces there. I'm using the argument concept. So basically, I'm binding an argument to here. Real quick on that, notice I define my argument by going here and doing it at this point, and I could have multiple ones. But if you want to, you can actually go to the UX properties here and then access that right here. So you can kind of get to it two ways. You can go ahead and just go at the UX level, define it there, or in some of the controls, you can access it there. The other is flexibility. You go, okay, hey, that looks great. Well, let's go ahead and enhance this. So now I can focus on customer experience. So I can go customer ID, and I can go ahead and just do a few little things here, and that's there. And I'm going to actually take two breaks. Or actually, you know what? I'm going to try this. It's H, right? Is that, no, HR, just for fun. Yep. Okay. So again, I am not a designer. And so now I click OK, save this, working preview. I'm going to show you one other really neat thing too. That's something really cool. Okay. So I can go ahead and filter my data, and now looking pretty cool. It's looking a little nicer. Let's go to something that has more than one. And obviously, this could be improved with bolding. And what I would do is probably create a CSS classes and attach them to stuff. But even this, and it's fast. Now, one other little really cool thing about this, which is really neat, is let's say, and this I didn't plan. So if this breaks, blame Dave, okay? Just in turn, he's pushing me to do this. So what's really neat about the Viewbox and also list control, which you may or may not be aware of, is the following, is that you'll notice when I go to Viewbox so in here, I've got my data source, my fields, and my layout. So you can see this is kind of this has all the data about the person or a subset, whatever it happens to be. I can go to Viewbox properties, and I can go down here, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit. And where is it? Where's the, that's why it's broken. I didn't do it there. It's right up top, multiple layouts. Now notice when I click this, you'll see there's a new tab here called multiple layouts. And there's still my layout here. So what I'm going to do now, which is really cool, is I'm going to go ahead and add a layout, and I'm going to call this mini. And I'm going to say it's a duplicate of my existing, because I don't want to have to recreate everything, and I'm going to click OK. So now I have two layouts in my item here. So I'm going to go to the Viewbox layout, and I'm going to select default. And you know what? Didn't copy that. Interesting. So this is my default one. Now I'm going to go down here below, and I'm going to say mini. and I'm going to go ahead and go to freeform, and I'm going to paste it there. I'll have to, that may be a bug. It didn't copy over when I said create a default. But you know what I want to do is I want to get rid of all this stuff, and I just want to say customer, I want to make this a little small. Okay. Okay, so now I have something very simple. It's just going to show the customer ID and the contact name. And I'm going to go back here to multiple layouts, and you can see this one's called the default one, and it is the default one. You select it here and you say, when this first shows, use that one. So we'll click OK. So what I'm going to do now here is I'm going to add another button real quick. Okay, and I'm going to say layout. Let's call it actually mini layout. And we'll go ahead and make that 100%. And I gotta love this. Finish followed by text, go to the image name. And I'll just pick something cool. It looks cool. Let's say that. Okay. Just add a little pizzazz. You always want to add a little pizzazz. It doesn't cost you anything. So now I've got this button mini layout. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go into my click event for that. And I'm going to go to my view box, control actions. And I'm going to say select layout. And I want it to go for customer view box mini. And you know what? I'm going to make it animated to make it look very cool. Okay. So now I've got a button that allows you, and this is where you really start seeing the powers, that basically you could have multiple layouts. And by the way, I'm using a button to do that, but you could also say, oh, you're on a phone, use this layout. You're on a tablet, use this layout. So I'm going to go ahead and filter my data. Let's go ahead and do to London. Okay. So notice it used my default layout, but now I can say, hey, you know what? Let's use my mini layout. Check that out.
Ooh.
It basically just re-renders on there, no callback to the server. It just says, oh, take the existing data and now run it through that mini layout and show it on the screen. And obviously I could create another button that would say, you know, default or, you know, full layout, and it would just re-render that instantly. And you're using the machine's horsepower versus the server. So now you can have all these cool layouts. I can say, oh, I want to see the detail. I can do other things like that. So when you start exploring the view box, you're going to find that its flexibility is just off the charts. You can do things you never even thought to do it. And most importantly, it's fast. It is insanely fast because we're leveraging just all of the built-in horsepower of the browser, both the Edge and the Chrome. Now Edge has the Chrome stuff there. So things happen really quick. So, you know, I can say like there's a little delay as I grab because it's querying the database and bringing the data back. So it's network dependent there, but once it's there, now when I go to mini layout, it's just goes really fast. So you can have different views of it. These views could have different fields, different representations, you name it, and it's really, really funny. So, and you can also add links. So for instance, when you click on one, you know, there's ways to trigger it, and we'll cover that stuff in the future. Anyway, so that is, and I want to say thank you to the individual who sent this request in, allowed me to kind of build this demonstration. But that's what's called an argument-driven view box control with a little extra spice, which is the ability to have multiple layouts.
Very cool.
Sorry, there we go.
Very nice.
Excellent.
All right, so Dion, of course, they want you to take it even further. You've showed off how to go against SQL, and you discussed using local data. But what if we wanted to populate this from an API? And let's say we wanted to use a curl command or something like that. How would you go about doing that for a Viewbox?
Great. Gosh, I really should have a pre-made endpoint.
I should have prefaced this by saying this is a hard one.
Right. Well, I'll show you what to do kind of on the high level.
Exactly.
It may, you know, not work. So, in fact, I have one. I just don't remember what the endpoint is. And what I used was Alpha with their built-in API generator. It's really cool. It just generates you can actually generate a select query against a database. It's
now,
really,
isn't there
really
something
cool
like
stuff.
Postman or something like that I know you've gone over something like that in the past, which gives you a fake API you can play with?
Yeah. Well, let me go ahead and just show how I would go ahead and do that. And then why don't we do this? Let me do a quick overview, but I'll go through and we'll come back and do a more detailed one with a real API and show you how those things work there. So And I'm going to make this very simple, just kind of there. We'll go to panel card. I always like panel cards. I'm going to go ahead and put in a view box now. And we'll go ahead and make that thing. Now, when I go in here, when I go to the data source, again, it defaults to standard fixed HTML. But now we can say, oops, I'm sorry. It's, oh, by the way, I made a mistake, but now I did that on purpose. Notice when I click here, there's two modes, HTML and data. This is insanely cool. Notice when I'm HTML, there's two ways you can define your HTML. One is you can define now, and therefore you go over here to Viewbox layout and you put in, hello, you just put in CSS and HTML. But what you can do here is you can also set JavaScript, and then get it, the actual HTML can come from a JavaScript function versus being hard coded. So you can do some just incredibly flexible things with that. That's more advanced. You'll need to know more about JavaScript, but there's some great examples in there. But
So like
it's
you could, for example, allow the user to say, you know what, I don't want to see these fields on my display, and
yeah, exactly.
the JavaScript can handle it. Yep.
Yeah, and therefore you don't have this. You could probably do that with templating. There's some tricks to templating, but this gives you just that, like, I want to literally on the fly recreate this HTML. So genericizing it. But so we'll go back to data, and I'm going to select REST API. Okay, so the first thing I do with my REST API is that I can still grab and build arguments. This is a new UX, that's why there's none there. So you can pass in, so often an API will have, you can pass in parameters to the URL to do it, and that's what I'd like to be able to show to further, show how you can filter stuff. So you can create arguments from there. Now, there's another thing you can do. When this API call, you can actually do two different things. You can say server. So what that will do is it will send it back to alpha, the alpha server, and then the alpha server will call that API, get the data, and return it. But you could also make the API call directly from the client where this is running. So if it's out on someone's laptop or phone, it literally can bypass the alpha server and go to that API and get that data, which is very handy for performance because now you can offload certain calls from alpha and the server. So the server serves up the UX, gets it ready to go. And then after that, it could be making calls against Amazon or eBay or Twitter or whoever knows that. But I'm going to use server for now. Now, this is where we put in our API endpoint. And so I can go in here and I can say HTTP, and we should come back and do a detailed version of this because
yeah, that would be cool.
mycoolapi.com/customers. Okay. Now, neat thing you can do is I could go, insert that and insert a field on my field, and it will automatically, essentially like an argument, pick up a field value and put it in my endpoint. And that usually defines the kind of information that will come back from it. So you'll see there's an example here where you're saying customer ID, that's an argument, that's getting it from an argument, but you can also get it from a field. So you can use two different methods you want to use from there. So now that I've done there, now this is kind of very nice, and I love this feature that they built into it, is that when you're building and doing your initial work, you may not want to be calling that API like over a few, so what you can do is you can create sample data. You can actually paste it in here, or you can actually make a sample call and get that data. And basically it pulls back an example of what that JSON would be. Now that I have there, when I'm in the Viewbox layout and everything else, I can just go ahead and start working with it. And I'm not sitting there having to make calls and do weird things like that. So that's what's called example data there. Now, if that API is authenticated, it allows you to pass in authentication data, which is most likely true. So for instance, maybe there's a token that needs to be passed every time that call is made. Things like that. There's some other things, JSON path, which is to where you want to extract only a portion of that. So we'll come back and do a little bit. I really want to do this because API, you may even build your own APIs on your alpha server and then start building all your user interfaces off there, which I think is where people will eventually go because of the flexibility there. A couple other things you can do, which is called post-process XBasic functions, so that after the data has been collected, and this only works when you're calling the alpha server, you can actually run it through XBasic to kind of clean it up before it actually gets sent out to the Viewbox. So if you want to actually go through and pick out just a few things and not deliver the whole thing, you can do that. Then we have our delay renders. That's the basic concept. Once you have there, the rest of the stuff I've shown is pretty much the same. You can have multiple layouts, you can have the HTML, you have the there, and you can also do templating, which I want to show from there. So I'm going to hold off here. I just want to kind of show you how you would attack that problem, but we'll come back and do a more detailed representation of this, because I think you're going to find that this is becoming more and more the way to do it. So I'm making a note here on my little list of things to do. Oh, there's nothing else to do. So I'll do API Viewbox. It's like, yeah, Dave goes, I'll fix that problem.
It's a short list. Yeah, I'll take that list.
Yeah. Like, this wasn't things I need to do for Dave list. So
No, that's a totally different list. Yeah.
It's like, hear that? I'm going through the 5,000 pages that I have that you've given me to go through there. I need a Foley guy to start making noises, the sound effects. So API Viewbox, and I also said, templating. I want to talk about templating also, about how you can use templating to make your Viewbox, or I'm sorry, not your Viewbox, but your rendering of the data dynamic. So basically, the JSON that comes back, you can actually use that information to alter what the person sees, and it's really fun, and it's super fast, and again, makes for very flexible interfaces. So great question, but we'll come back and do this justice, so that in terms of being able to really show you what this could do.
Excellent. We also had a question up at the beginning of our webinar, which had to do with building iOS builds in Apple using PhoneGap build.
Okay.
As some of you are aware, the way that you can build applications in Alpha Anywhere is using a technology called PhoneGap build, which wraps together PhoneGap components, Cordova components, to create an APK that you can then use to submit to the Apple Store or to Google Play. Recently, PhoneGap build not recently, PhoneGap build has not been updated in a little while. And as a result, people who are using PhoneGap build are beginning to get warnings saying that starting in April 2020, their apps are going to have to use a new version of the iOS SDK. And that is true. So the question is, what's Alpha doing about it? Well, our chief of mobility, Bob Moore, has looked into this issue and believes that actually PhoneGap build, because we weren't sure what the status is in fact probably going to solve this for us before the deadline comes about. If it doesn't, we have 3 other plans, and I'll sort of go over them quickly with you right now. Coming up, I think in the not too distant future, we're going to do a quick webinar to show you again how to build clients, how to build your PhoneGap applications without using PhoneGap build, using the client side CLI technique. We're also looking into 2 services for building out PhoneGap implementations in the future. One is a simple professional services one where you basically send in your apps and we build it for you. But the other one would be more like a PhoneGap build replacement. And that's a little bit longer term, but something we're examining as well. So that would be a self-service type of technology, much like PhoneGap build is right now. If you do have questions about this, by all means, send them to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. I can put you in touch with our VP of Mobility, who can get you more information. For applications that you already have in the store, you will be allowed to update those even using the older version up until November. So this is the most immediate issue, is people trying to get things into the store before April 2020. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Looking through, a bunch of people
on top
love
of it is what I want. We want everybody
to know. We're on top
to
of
know.
it. We've got four plans.
We are. It's very serious, and we're on top.
Exactly.
Good.
So 2 questions. We might be able to get this one done in the time. You know that button that you used that switched you to the mini layout?
Yes.
Could you make it so that it's toggled between mini?
Oh, good point.
I guess it would have to know its previous state, so that might be stored someplace.
Yeah. Let's see. What I'd probably do is create 2 containers with the 2 buttons, and then just kind of show and hide the containers, as it goes. Yep. That's a quick and dirty methodology there.
Yeah.
There is a way.
I mean, your action script could set
Yeah,
a
okay. So
variable.
how I might, yeah, what I probably do
Let you
is
know
first
when
thing I'd
it's
do
ready.
is notice that this is linked to the button itself. So what I do is I'd convert this to a JavaScript action, and I call this, you know, show mini. And then I'd have a show. Then I'd have another one. Well, let's go ahead and see if we can do it in time. Let's go ahead and duplicate. Why? By the way, this is really cool. I can say duplicate action
Cool.
and show default.
Maxi. Oh, okay.
Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
So now I'll go into my show default, and it's using the same thing, but I can call this, you know, the default. So basically it saves me a little time having to recreate everything, but I could do that there. So I've got these, and you notice we have this action JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and say show mini, grab this. Now, when I click this button right here, right now, oops, I'm sorry, did I click the wrong thing? Let's go to, yeah. If I click the button here, I can actually go ahead and let's see. How do I want to do that? I'm gonna I think there's a command. I wonder if there is a command. So right now, instead of running that, I'm going to delete this. And so it takes a little action job or a little JavaScript here. So let's go ahead. Here we go. I want to see if I can get the current.
Oh, I see. What is the, see what the actual layout
I'm just
is?
seeing if I can
Right
get
from
the
the control?
current.
Yeah.
No, that's it. I was thinking there was one that it would tell me what the current view is selected in the view box. So I don't know that for now. So I'm going to have to kind of fake this. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to go down here. I'm just going to add a text box, and I'll go view, and I'll default that to call that default. So I would normally hide this thing so it's hidden. Now on my button in here, I can just go into my text mode, and the first thing, yes, I want to change it. I can go here. I can say, and go, I can go var current view is equal to dialog dot object dot get value, and we can grab that control view. Okay. Now I can say if view current view is equal to default, and then I forget else is I think, and I'm not a big JavaScript guy, so I can go in here. So it's a little code, but let's see. And then this one, and this one's, let's see, let's go and show default. Because I've created my two action JavaScript behind the scenes. Now I need to do one other thing, is that basically I'm using that hidden view thing here. And by the way, I don't have to use a control. You can actually set arguments and stuff like that because there's a lot of built-in function. But I'm also going to go ahead and go dialog.object.setValue and set the view to be mini. Okay. And then I'm going to go in here. And when this does here, I'm going to set that to be default. So I'm just using an internal like tracker kind of thing. I was thinking that maybe if I could point and say, hey, Viewbox, what is your current view? Then I would know that, but I'm kind of doing it this way. So hopefully we'll see. Oh, nope. Unexpected token. Okay. So we have that. If current there, is it else if? No. Okay. This is where the internet, and again, I don't do a lot of JavaScript because Alpha does it for me. Else, okay. What do I do here? Okay. This W3 Schools is actually pretty good stuff, pretty readable. So it's if condition else. Oh, maybe it has to be on one else. Oh, duh.
Yep.
Wrong direction.
Yep.
Okay. And I haven't changed the name, but you only have a few moments here, so. And we'll see it below chunks. But actually, we'll show the JavaScript debugger here. Okay, so we'll go ahead and select our London. Okay, so you'll notice currently I've got default in here. Now if I click here, oh, interesting. What did it not do? Let me go back into my Action JavaScript.
Default.
Actually, you know what? I'm going to edit that action. I'm going to turn it into this. I'm going to do it this way. Oh, I bet I know what's causing. I think that was working fine. I think, let's see.
Did your button when you copied in that second control not update?
Yeah, let's see. If it is default show mini and current views, yeah. Let's see. Oh man, well, so close. It's sort of working. You can see it's kind of working.
It's absolutely the right idea. I'm sure we can work it out there for next.
Oh, you know what? I think let me go in here. Let's go to my JavaScript actions. Let's go. Show mini says show mini. And so let's go ahead and just recreate this. I think it might be here. So let's do that real quick. Viewbox. And we'll say select layout and select default. And then if not, then it might be in terms of how we're setting the check. We'll see if that box is changing. So we'll give it right. And then not, come back next week. It's a cliffhanger.
It might be a cliffhanger. Yeah.
It might be a cliffhanger. Let's just see if this runs.
Now, if it does work, it's not a cliffhanger, but still come back next week. So.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, London. So we have something interesting you see. Okay.
The anticipation's killing me.
Interesting.
Well, we'll work it out for next week.
It's mini, but what's happening is I'm not changing this. Notice that should be changing this from what I think my if statement is off. Something about my if statement in my in this action right here, this code. So if current view is equal to, maybe it's equal. And again,
it is equal for JavaScript.
I think it's equal because I'm not a JavaScript guy, and because JavaScript is so
it's fairly
annoying. But I'm like, by the way, and we'll follow here. Because JavaScript is like the #1 kind of thing here.
Look at that.
Very
nice.
Boom, boom, boom.
All right,
nice.
It did work. We do want everyone coming back next week.
Yeah, I know. And by the way, that's why I'm so excited. Python's beating JavaScript as the #1 language now. Beat JavaScript.
Is it really fantastic? Yeah.
Anyway, so this is available. If anybody wants it, email us at guides@air. Feel free to insert a $20 bill. We'll get it out to you really quickly. You don't have to, but
no, it could be a virtual
crowdfunding. Yeah. And do take care out there. Minimize your travel and take care of yourself.
Hand sanitizer, wash your hands. Exactly.
Excellent.
Dion, thank you very much for presenting.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for showing up, and those who asked questions especially. We hope to see you at next week's webinar. Take care and have a great week. Bye-bye.